Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Today's video takes us on a tour across the country, the East, the Midwest, and the West, through the life and times of the largely forgotten Union Brigadier General pictured here, John Potts Slough. Our tour begins on an April day in 1864 in the military district of Alexandria, Virginia, along the Potomac River, just a little bit south of Washington, D.C., where Slough is the military governor in charge of the town. In a field near Army Barracks, not far from downtown Alexandria, a crowd estimated at between 4,000 and 5,000 soldiers and civilians have gathered to bear witness to a military execution. The condemned, Private John H. Thompson of the 1st Ohio Cavalry, had been tried and convicted of desertion and attacking loyal Union men in Northern Virginia, sometimes alone and other times in league with Colonel John Singleton Mosby's Rangers. An observer described the scene. He, Thompson, was shot upon his own coffin by a squad detailed for the purpose from the 1st District of Columbia Regiment. The religious ceremonies were effacing in the extreme. After prayer by the chaplain and attendants, a hymn sung in which the prisoner joined, his voice sounding clear and strong above the others. He evinced the utmost calmness, never moving a muscle in agitation up to the command, aim, fire, which consigned him to eternity. He met his death more with the air of a martyr than of a traitor. His conduct and conversation prior to his execution indicated penitence. The mournful strains of an army band deepened the solemn gravity of the occasion. This was but one of the many duties overseen by Slough before, during, and after the Civil War. He was something of a zealot, showing up in numerous places at pivotal moments in time throughout the mid-19th century. Slough, a native of Cincinnati and son of a steamboat builder, was born in 1829, attended law school in Cincinnati, and began his professional life as an attorney. An outspoken Democrat with a fiery temper and prone to streaks of violence, he was expelled from the Ohio General Assembly in 1857 after he picked a fight with one of his peers and then struck the man a hard blow directly on his forehead. Slough left Ohio after that for Kansas Territory, which seems exactly in line with his violent temper, and he jumped into the middle of the fray against pro-slavery forces. You students know that whole era as Bloody Kansas. Slough served as a delegate to the convention to draft what became known as the Wyandotte Constitution, which is the state's official document today. Just as he did in Ohio, Slough sometimes used his fists to make his points. In 1860, he was on the move again, this time to Colorado Territory. After the Civil War erupted, Slough, now 32 years old, received a captain's commission and assignment to the 1st Colorado Infantry, popularly known as Pike's Peakers. Slough had soon advanced to colonel and commander of the regiment. One historian described the soldiers with these words: "The personnel of the regiment was of an unusually high order, the men being hardy and well-seasoned, self-reliant and accustomed to danger, but were lacking in military experience." Meanwhile, Confederate forces, Texans, commanded by Brigadier General Henry Hopkins Sibley, invaded New Mexico Territory, defeated Colonel Edward R. S. Canby's Union troops at the Battle of Val Verde, and kept on going, capturing Albuquerque and Santa Fe. The aggressive Slough marched his men into New Mexico and headed for Fort Union. As the senior officer, he assumed command of the garrison of New Mexico volunteers upon his arrival. Confederates led by Lieutenant Colonel William Reed Scurry headed to Fort Union, intending to destroy the garrison before Slough had his act together. But when Slough got word of the action and heard the Confederates were closing in, he put his own men into action and moved to intercept Scurry. On March 26, 1862, the forces clashed at Apache Canyon, and it was a drawn battle. They fought again 2 days later at Pigeon's Ranch along the Santa Fe Trail near Glorietta Pass. Here, Scurry and his Texans had the upper hand until Slough sent a detachment of his men to flank the Texans, destroying their supply train and turning the tide of battle into the favor of the Union soldiers. Slough stopped the Confederates that day, who eventually left New Mexico in Union hands and returned to Texas. According to a newspaper report, grateful Colorado volunteers sent Slough a gold inlaid sword on the occasion of the first anniversary of what became known, what went down in history as the Battle of Glorietta Pass. Slough responded, quote, "Remember the holy character of the cause in which you were engaged. Remember that you are American soldiers battling in the cause of universal freedom," end quote. After Glorietta Pass, Slough sensed that his work was done in the territory and there was no more fighting to be had. He was more or less right, and he resigned and headed back east to find more war. Promoted to brigadier general and assigned to the 2nd Brigade, 2nd Division of the 2nd Corps, and the Army of Virginia, he joined his new command at Harper's Ferry in May of 1862. He and his command remained in the Harper's Ferry area, playing no significant part in Stonewall Jackson's Shenandoah Valley campaign. By the end of the summer of 1862, Slough had been sent to Alexandria to clean up the city, which had been overrun by unruly Union soldiers and other unsavory characters. It took little time for Slough to whip the city and the soldiers into shape through curfews and other heavy-handed measures. Slough remained in Alexandria for the remainder of hostilities, seeing no more combat. He did, however, play a small role in international affairs. In early December of 1863, just months after the fall of Vicksburg and the Battle of Gettysburg shifted the war's momentum in favor of the United States, 4 warships of Russia's Baltic Fleet anchored off the Potomac River near Alexandria. The visit had been expected by the Tsar's Navy as part of a diplomatic tour that had begun a couple months earlier in coordination with its Pacific Fleet. The Russians arrived to great fanfare in New York, Washington, D.C., and San Francisco. The visits caused great consternation on the other side of the Atlantic, where surprised Britain reacted to the savvy move by their geopolitical rival. The British political establishment reconsidered its strained relationship with the United States as a result. Soon after the warships arrived near Alexandria, a delegation led by Governor Francis H. Pierpont of the reconstructed state of Virginia, Brigadier General Slough and his staff, and a party of other military and civilian persons paid its respect to the Russians. On board one of the vessels, this is again early December 1863, the Americans offered a series of toasts to celebrate the relationship between the two countries. One Union officer paid tribute to the Tsar's 1861 decree that emancipated serfs from their feudal lords. He toasted, quote, "America, the cradle of liberty, the home of the oppressed and downtrodden of every nation under the sun, had been taught what liberty truly was by the great act which liberated millions of Russians from slavery and serfdom," end quote. Slough had his own toast. It was a simple toast, quote, friendship, the great bond of union between Russia and the United States, may it never be broken, end quote. After the war ended, Slough briefly practiced law in Washington. In 1866, he headed back to New Mexico with an appointment from President Andrew Johnson as Chief Justice of the territory's court. One of his first acts was to fight to raise funds for markers and memorials to honor the Union soldiers who died in New Mexico's Civil War engagements. He didn't live to realize the dream. As the months passed, his progressive and reform-minded fight in Reconstruction America against crime and corruption made him a lot of enemies. His forceful, aggressive tactics only fueled the fire of those enemies. In December of 1867, at Santa Fe, after a legislator introduced a joint resolution labeling Slough unfit for office and requesting his removal as Chief Justice, Slough flew into a rage and accused the legislator, William Logan Ryerson, of cowardice, lying, and thieving. The two men met at a hotel bar to settle the matter, and it ended with Ryerson drawing his revolver first and shooting Slough. The bullet hit him in the upper thigh, and he succumbed to his wound a few hours later. Slough was all of 38 years old. Well, thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.